So this is the NF to Infra on the 3rd of October. So this is the second meeting. Maybe let's recap a little bit, Subhash, if you don't mind. Wait a minute, where is my screen? So this is where we discussed, right? You saw this?
It is not shared yet. The screen is not
Wait,
shared.
sorry. Okay, sorry. I will share. Do you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
So this is where so this is a bit what we discussed last time, right? So solely KRM based, right? Focus on a single cluster for now, right? And yeah, so the idea is to model the logic. So it's more of building the framework, right? And then discuss version dependencies and stuff like that. But in essence, I think this picture represents it, or reasonable is that, so on one hand, we express our requirements, right? Which can be related to anything at the end of the day, right? What for me is clear is that these requirements will somehow mutate based on the environment you execute them in, right? And then, we have to compare to the actual cluster somehow. So this is the cluster, it will give information. And so this is the actual, what is actually running, right? And so what will happen somehow, conceptually, is that these requirements will say, okay, I need this. He will say, I don't have this, or I have this. And so this is kind of your API between let's say, your requirements, which is in this case the NF, and then the infra on the other hand, right? So that's kind of the flow somehow. What we started to discuss last time is to show how this piece could look like. And so this is where we left, but okay, I don't know whether you have any questions or comments.
Of course, how I visualize it, it is like some kind of agreement provided by the NF vendor. So he will give you the some kind of agreement, and in front need to meet it. It's like we need to come with a common agreement whether we can provide it or we cannot provide it, or the need of some mutation in order to deploy the NF, right? So I don't think
so. So Subhash, so one thing is, one comment I would say in my view, it cannot be solely the NF vendor. It has to be, there has to be input from the operator itself. And because this piece, the vendor will never be able to tell, right? So it has to be a mix somehow.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. So I see. I'm coming from that policy point of view. So I see like we are trying to push some vendor-related policy, operator-related policies, and trying to fit in our cluster environment. So in that context, I was seeing that is it possible that we describe these requirements in some kind of specifically policy related NF, CRD. Okay.
I mean, whether it's policy or not, I mean, so here is an example of how it could look like.
Yeah.
So, but
okay,
so this is the CRD, by the way. So everything will be KRM based, right? So what so this is kind of an indirected CRD. And the question is whether we need that or not, because this is a CRD that. Right, so this is a reference to another CRD somehow, and I'm wondering whether it serves a purpose or not. So this would be your overarching piece, and then this is the detail, right? So so basically, the question is whether this is even needed. We could also say, okay, it is everything is one. We basically express it like this, and you basically do an annotation or something like that to say this is a requirement. And with that, we have sufficient information to do it. But so that's. But in essence, what this is basically a set of requirements that you as a vendor have.
Yes.
Or you have to deploy this piece of software, if you will, right? That's what we are talking about. Because, I mean, in my view, okay, we talk about NF, but what I see is that this can be generalized to any piece of software you put onto the cluster. So it's not necessarily linked to a network function. Because this example that I'm using here is the in the cluster wire that I built. I have similar, let's say, requirements that that are needed. So it's basically a similar use case that expresses, for example, that expresses a number of requirements. So, for example, this one is I need a namespace.
Right.
Right. So
yes.
This is I need another namespace, but I need privileged access. Right.
Okay.
So this is the way so you and here there's no mutation or something like that, so it's plain like it is, right? But for example, in this VLAN index, right? So or VXLAN index, I need to get an allocation that is specific to the environment that will tell me. So here I need variable. I need environment specific information that I as a vendor cannot know ahead of time.
Correct. Yes.
And so this is how so the logic that is underneath here is basically coming from Terraform, basically. So you basically express a resource and you reference it at a later point in time. So I've been exploring with that option because here you see this is actually environment specific, and this will be getting a provider that is a provider resource that is going to be dependent on the operator itself. But what I'm trying to say is that whether we call this a policy or not, I think it's a way to express what you want and to actuate it with the actual environment information that is needed to actuate upon. So for example, here, this is a cluster name. I need a cluster name, right? So I need to know which cluster this is to be deployed upon. And then I can fill out this config map, for example, right? So these are, this is a way to do it. I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but something in this form we will need.
I see. Okay.
And so what I did initially is I put like an overarching CRD that actually references these building blocks, right? But so for example, this would be, so each of these I would represent through a config map, right? So this would be config maps. And this is the way to indirect them. But what you see is that if these are all packaged in one package, then I sometimes have the feeling this is a little bit too much, right? Because I have to fill in this and then I have to create that. So I could also, for example, say here, annotate annotations, and then I say, let's say this is a requirement of something. We call this Nephew requirements.nephew.org is true or something like that. And by doing this, you know that this, annotation. So that this is a requirement element, right? So we could do something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Without I'm making this obsolete. I'm just brainstorming a little bit. I trying to show different options on how to express this.
So
But in
Bim,
essence, in my view, this is a policy, Subhash, right?
yeah, I also agree. It's like it is like how we are calling it. It could be visualized as a CRD. It could be some technology specific thing. Of course, yeah. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So Bim, how exactly you pull the cluster related information and try to tie with the CR instance, maybe how you are tying it cluster specific information?
So this would be if I want to deploy this network function on this particular cluster. So it's like what we do with PVs and PVS today. So I would reuse that concept.
Okay.
So basically, you take this package. So let's say this is a package with a collection of CR with a collection of requirements.
Yeah.
Then this package would be mute. So basically, there would be something that sits on top to say, hey, you want to be scheduled on this cluster. And then the cluster information would be actuated. So the way this would work, right, for example, is if you use the Terraform syntax, what you do basically is you say, for us, a cluster is a workload cluster, right?
Okay.
And the name is defined. So this parameter would be referenced or would be actuated by the PVS.
Okay.
So the PVS will say, I schedule on edge number 1, right? And then this variable will be filled out. He will fetch this resource, see whether it exists. And if it exists, it will do this. That's basically what this logic says.
When you say fetch this resource, so that means you'd be referring the edge cluster, or this information already will be available in the management cluster, because everything we are doing in management cluster, right?
Yeah, all of this would be management cluster, right? So yeah, I didn't make it clear, but all of this will happen in the management. So all of this will happen in the management cluster. This is of course happening on the workload cluster.
Yeah.
But so if we schedule a resource on a cluster that does not exist, none of this will be executed, basically.
Okay. Okay.
Now that's also something we can discuss whether we need to do that or not, right? But we could execute it or we could not execute it. So that's a choice we have. But I wanted to build in the logic to be able to do so. That we can basically check whether some of these resources are there or not. And based on that, we can then say, okay, what do you do? But you can
Yeah, right.
also we can remove this block, right? I mean, this can be, or basically this is the way what you have to do to remove it. Then it doesn't check. If you remove this, it doesn't do the check. So you have the choice to do so or not.
Okay. Okay. So let's say if you did not do any check, then it will go to the workload cluster. If you try to deploy it and it fails
No,
there.
no. So basically, what will happen is this will basically what this check does, in essence, is basically validate whether this arrow should be executed. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say we don't do the check. So what will happen is this requirement will be then expressed with local variables, right? With local environment information. And then there will be a process. So this will go into, I think, a controller, or at least that's my view. And that controller will check to the actual status of the cluster. Given there is no cluster, it will basically say, yeah, not possible, right?
Oh, okay.
You see, so you could either build in some of these checks here, or you can let it go, and then this guy will do it. That's a choice you have with the system. But so nothing will be deployed. So there will be a controller of some sort that basically checks this against this, and if the delta, so if it's okay, nothing will happen, right? If there is something that is not okay, it will schedule the resource onto the particular cluster to actuate it. So for example, if you take this example, I need a namespace, and this namespace does not exist, right? What will happen here is that namespace, so the first thing we still have to discuss, I think, is who is responsible of which resources in the cluster, right? Because namespace is a bit of is namespace an infra, or is it from my perspective, namespace is an infra. It's an infra resource. Because what you see in a lot of cases is people do not, so that depends then again on the environment you have. So there needs to be also here an authority, the authority whom is responsible for it is also going to be important at some point, right? Because for example, RBAC rules. So if you have software package, you typically have a namespace, you have RBAC rules, you have CRD, which is a cluster-wide resource, and then you have the actual software. What you see in some organizations is that there is 4 different people responsible for these resources. In some organizations, they don't care, and it's all together, or it can be another mix. So we have to, we probably have to cater for that. Is who are the roles and responsibilities that act upon that? Because last time when we discussed, for example, Boyan was saying, okay, in our environment, this is all manual. But that's also okay, because then this is your contract, if you will. So by the fact that we express our API, and if it's manual, it's possible that someone manually executes this and then fills out the status that I'm done, right? That's still a workflow that that the system would support, or has to support, I think.
Right. Yes.
And so what you see is that so there might be multiple roles involved here that are going to act, right? So for example, namespace, right? RBAC rules is typically security. CRDs is typically something, right? And then you have the actual software. So so you could split this into different roles potentially.
So there the different team get involved and to approve it, right?
Yeah, so these roles are, who has the authority to act, so to approve and to act, basically, right? To act on it, and act can be either, it's the roles, who can act, basically. It's probably the proper naming of who can do what with respect to these things, right? And what you also will see is that you will have a dependency tree, right? That you create here.
Dependency tree as in?
See, you cannot deploy a software if you have no namespace.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And the same thing is like the RBAC rules most likely will not work unless a namespace is there, right? So you see here that you get like an implicit dependency tree for the actuation, if you will.
Yeah. But cluster wide and namespace links, I think 2 RBAC rules, right? 2 kind of RBAC rules. Cluster wide also is there.
Yeah, so typically a CRD you can do independent, right? So the first 2 you can do independent. The RBAC rules is typically dependent on these 2.
Oh, yeah.
And software will be dependent on these two as well.
Right.
So yeah, so there will be what we call a dependency controller, which will handle that. But that's more of the actuation itself.
And Vim, I had one more question. So, this you are visualizing it as a admission controller, or it will be again a part of conditional SDK, like a conditional dance. Will it be a part of it, or it is another admission controller?
I mean, how we implement this, we have to discuss. I think so. For me, it should. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think we have to see whether the framework is okay or not. I don't know if this framework is okay. Then we have to see what is the best way to implement it. At the moment, I would think to do it with a regular controller for now, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So
Do you have a
this
view?
requirement, I was thinking like these two possibilities are there. Like vendor provides the requirement as part of the package. Is it the right thing to start? It's like a vendor provides the requirement, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it will be available through over the KPT pipeline. So maybe we can process it there. How I was envisioning the policies in context of the any NF vendor that you have put in the pipeline, and you add one more KPT function. So that job would be, it will pull some information from the cluster, like what are the running configuration. Based on that, it will try to match what is given in the NF, whether it is matching it or not. And based on that, I'll generate the result, whether it is deployable or not. So that we can think it. But yeah, of course, this part I did not thought around it. There could be a approval mechanism, like this team, this different roles could be involved, and they can process it, or let's say something is missing, some requirements are missing, that we can deploy in the that we can deploy in the cluster. So that part I did not thought while thinking around the policy. So, but yeah, in a
But so
KPT pipeline, yeah.
So just in this thing, so this would be the pipeline that does it, right? So this would be, so this actually, this language, if you will, expresses what would happen here. So basically what you saw in the thing is it's basically the mutation steps that are needed to do this. So in other words, the outcome of this, right? So the outcome of after you have executed, so this would be executed, by the way, here, right? And then the outcome is basically, so the result that you see is the actual requirements for that particular environment is coming here, right? So the result of this is going to be an updated package that contains the specific environment, contains the specific requirements that are needed based on the environment this gets executed upon. That's what you will see here, right? So this will be executed, and then you will get a new output with the actual request. And then, then you will have something that first validates that against the actual and has the authority to wait. So you could first thing you check the actual states from this information versus the requirements, right? And then you have to have something that actually schedules that work. So it's kind of what a controller typically do. So this is your desired state, this is the actual state, and then you schedule the delta, right? That's kind of what a controller typically does.
So if I understand correctly, what we are generating, yeah, the part which you are highlighting, it is actually the diff which is required to execute that NF in the cluster, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So that will be validated by these different roles, and once they will approve, we are all okay to deploy the NF or any application, right? I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the way you have to look at this is there is a bunch of resources that are going to be the output here, which are the resources that should actually end up here. That's how I look at it. And so
Right.
here you express at a higher level, and then here you actually get the real resources as if we would actuate it, and then we validate it against the actual cluster. And then the authority that sits behind will have to validate the feasibility and whether or not they agree with it, right? So that's what this. So there is bit. Yeah. So my view is my view is that the output here should be the actual resource that actually goes to the cluster, and then there should be an authority that actually validates that based on its where we map these resources to.
Okay. And your generated output will contain diff also. I mean to say, let's say NF vendor said that he want to deploy using the Ubuntu operating system, Ubuntu OS. Assume that.
Yeah.
So and the operator says that no, let's use a Fedora or something else image. So that mutation we will also see in this output, right? It's like it is changed from Ubuntu to Fedora, so that thing will change. We'll see in output, correct?
Yes, yeah, that will be a requirement. So, for example, we will have Ubuntu OS, right? So OS as a requirement.
Yeah.
And yeah, you will see that now there is various ways to go about this, right? You could schedule a new node pool, right? Because mutating and host a node, because you can have various scenarios now. Let's take that example, right? One is there is already a set of network functions running, okay?
Okay.
And they are running on Fedora, right? So, and they have not specified it. Do you kill the? You can do two things. You can either remove and upgrade the OS to Fedora, to Ubuntu, and reschedule the nodes, or you can create a new node pool which is Ubuntu based, and keep the others as is.
Yeah. So here, actually, I want to bring another thought. Let's say the operator puts a policy saying that any workload which are going to run in their cluster should run on specific OS image. So that, let's say, operator is putting that constraint. So would you able to handle it using this framework?
Yes, so it's part of the authorization flow, right? So that means that if you schedule something on OS that does not exist, it will be rejected.
Okay, yeah, that's right. And Bim, let's say if we allow some kind of mutation with like only specific let's say image, if you take an example of image, we say that only only use the image from certain repositories,
Mhm.
certain image repositories. So those kind of mutation, I think NF to infra also do it and generate as a part of the output, and which again will approve it. So something
Yeah, it's in the
that's what.
same flow. So your
Mhm,
authority, if you will, right? So if you go to the steps, right? Maybe we should create a new slide to
mhm.
make it a bit clearer. How should I represent it? So at the end of the day, we are going to get a bunch of requirements, which are actually KRM resources.
Right.
Right. So here we get, yeah, let's fill it maybe. So here we get requirements. So this could be OS, right? Or image or something like that, right? This could be OS Ubuntu or something like that. And this could be image X, right? And
Mhm.
wait, so a repo slash X or something like that, right? So that's going to be the output of this step here, right? Then what you need is, I think we need to each of these will have an owner somehow, right? Or a responsibility. So we need somehow some logic to map. Let's maybe write it down. We need some logic to map the requirements to the roles slash owners, right?
Right.
For approval. Yeah, for approval. And then the second thing what you said is, and then I think each of these will have a set of rules, right?
Right.
That, or policy rules, like you were saying, right?
Right.
That yeah, that are relevant for this information, right? Which will help in the approval or rejection, right?
Wim, actually, is it right again putting the policy there, or better just call requirement as a policy? Yes, what is your opinion?
I think the policy is different, right? Because let's say
Mhm.
I take your example, right? The
Mm.
requirement will say I need an image of, and the image will be specified. Let's call it nephew.org, right? And the customer has specified no, they can only come from local repos, right?
Right.
And the requirement that they say is this repo, right? So they
Yeah.
basically specified something which the policy is reject, right? So the
Right.
policy for me is optional, if you will. I mean, that's a way to in the approval cycle, right? To help this person, if you will, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So the policy, as a result, is potential is, you could say, optional or not. So this is because what Boyan was saying when we were discussing is they want to do it manual. Okay, if it's manual, that's fine, right? So that we should allow that,
Right.
right? So the system should whether this approval is manual or, let's say, semi-automated, right, or
Yeah.
fully automated, eh?
Yes.
Or completely automatic is a choice, right, that the people have, right?
Correct.
So there will
Correct.
be somehow a police here. I don't know whether I have a picture for it, but okay. Doesn't really matter. But there is somehow someone who is going to say it is good or bad, right? So if the sun shines
Exactly.
or the sun doesn't shine, right? Or it's a storm,
Yeah.
right?
Important is
So
whether they are approving or not approving. That is the important. Yeah. Either it
yes,
is. Yeah.
and how they do it, okay, I make at the moment a bit of an abstraction about it, right?
Yeah.
And so there is one is approve or not approve, and
Yeah.
the other step is the validation to the actual. So I think there's probably a good practice to say I approve or don't approve. So do we? So this will be the actual status, right? So which is the actual status in the cluster, right? In the cluster or from the cluster, right? Actual cluster state. Let's put it like that. So the question is, it's probably wise to do the validation. And so we need to do a check between the desired. So there is a number of things to be done, right? We need to do a check between the desired state, which is the requirement, versus the actual state, right? Which is the cluster. So we could do this step before this, or we could do this before that. You see?
Yeah.
I have the feeling it's better to do this first, right? Because there's no point in putting a requirement if it's already fulfilled. Then it's stupid to. Now, of course, you have the scenario we have to deal with is that, let's say this requirement was fulfilled by someone else, then someone else deletes it, and now we are going to. So how do we handle that, right? So let's say you have application 1, and he or she, this basically asks for a certain environment to be set, and we set it, and then application 2 comes, has the same requirement, it was already fulfilled, so we actuate it, so it's no longer approved. Now application 1 gets deleted. What happens to application 2?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think you should not delete the resource, right?
yes, I agree. So this should not be deleted. So we need to have somewhere a system that.
I think you should keep it requirement to resource mapping.
Yes. So we have to find a way. Yeah. And because you can have an end-to-one relationship somehow between what comes from here and what actually comes here,
right?
So let's say we need. So let's maybe list the things that we need to have, right? So we need to, and the order doesn't really matter actually, right?
Yeah.
We need to, so this has to happen, right? We need to map, let's say, requirements from different applications, right?
Right.
Or yeah. Or wait, so we have to map is a bad word. So we have to track requirements from
resource.
Yeah. Track overlapping. Yeah, I don't have a good word right now, but yeah, I think we know overlapping requirements, right?
Yeah.
So somehow, and then we need to have approval, right? Or authority, right? Approval. With you could say optional policy or something like that, right? To help assist, right? It's kind of an assistant. What else do we need? And then we need someone to actuate it.
So the second point where you said overlapping requirements. So again, it is important to understand it is the overlapping within the between the two different deployments or applications, right?
Yeah, from
we need to mention
different apps. Yeah, because if it's from one app, it should not be overlapping because it should come from one. I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
From different apps / network functions. I prefer to call them apps than network function because I think generic. Our system is generic.
Any possibilities if single app resource overlap, requirement overlap? No, right?
I mean, then this logic did not work in my view, right?
I'm just thinking
So
the
for
corner case.
example,
Yeah.
so let's say I specify namespace A and namespace A again, right? 2 times, then this system should take care of that, in my view.
Correct. Yeah. There's the hierarchy. Yeah. So
Yeah. And then there is another piece, let's say, I think besides this is that once we approve, we have to actuate, right?
correct. Yeah.
Actuate with dependencies, right? So this is what we call a dependency controller, I think. So someone needs to. So this is a separate. I would separate this. Each of these are separate actually. So maybe I can add them here for now, right? But I think it's always good to look at the steps what needs to happen and to segment and to yes segment it somehow, right?
And also we need to think around deletion step also. It's when
Yes. Yes. So track deletion is but I think is the deletion not relevant for this, right? Yeah, actuate / delete, right?
right.
So should the deletion also be approved?
I think that should not go to the approval process, right? It should like if we are deleting something from the repository, any no going on.
So for me, the destroy will be this piece is relevant here, right?
Yeah, that is relevant. Yeah, because we need to keep track which resource still need to be there. We cannot actually go and delete it.
I think for I don't know whether destroy needs to be approved. I would say no.
But just take it. Let's say you deployed some application with some namespace. Sorry, 2 application within the same namespace. Let's assume that. Okay. And you are going to delete one application. So it will again based on the dependency graph, it will try to delete the namespace, right? If
yes, but because if there is 2 apps, right? So app 1 and app 2, and they have both the same namespace, then so app 1 will create it, app 2 will see it's already there, so my requirement is fulfilled through this state. But we need to track the overlapping requirements. So then later when app, let's say 2 or 1, it doesn't really matter, gets deleted, the namespace, because that requirement is still valid from the other app, it should not be deleted. So that's what this piece should do, I think, right?
Yeah. But how exactly should be the what will be the flow for deletion?
So I think for deletion, the flow should be this requirement will be removed, right? So basically it starts from here that we remove this package somehow, right? So in other words, the result is that this will be destroyed, right? So this requirement is gone. That will be a trigger for the for somebody, right? That is acting upon it. It will see, okay, this requirement was already fulfilled. I was there, but there is another one that's still depending on it, so I'm not going to destroy it.
Perfect. Okay.
So that's so I think what is important is to say what we need to do. Then the next phase is how do we implement? How would we best implement this piece here somehow, right? How do we segment and who keeps track of what and stuff like that? Is what are the building blocks and the components to handle these? Because these are the things that we need to do at this somewhere here. So the actuation is, I think, the last step is somewhere here, right?
Right.
This is, for me, is definitely separated, right? The question is, what do we do with these here? I think this, for me, it's clear that this should be separated, right?
Yeah, dependency control. I think you have made a clear demarcation that it should be a separate one.
Yeah, for me, this is definitely separate. The question is, how do we split this, or should we split this or not, and so on and so forth. So that's not yet, but we could think about that a little bit on how to segment it, right?
Yes, yes. So, yeah. Okay, yeah, actually, I was thinking around admission controller also, whenever, let's say, a new package gets created, so that time we start checking its requirement, and based on those requirements, generate the resource, and what we can do. Okay, what will be the trigger for the dependency controller? Some resource, right?
So this, in my view, is yeah. So here we have a KRM, right? So this will all be KRM based, right?
Okay.
And the dependency controller will say, okay, this KRM, can I execute it somehow, right? And or do I need a dependency that I'm depending upon that needs to be fulfilled?
Right.
Ideally, we should make this as generic as we can, right? So we have to see, because there is a number of clear things that you already know, right? A CRD. And so let's say a policy could be dependent on a CRD and stuff like that. So of course we should not hard code this, right? So it should be, in my view, data driven. So this dependency controller should be fairly data driven without too much, too much hard coding, if you will, right? So this guy should have a dependency graph, but the way to express the dependency graph should, or he gets that dependency graph should be somehow data driven, I hope.
Okay. Maybe I think if we iterate through one example, that will help.
Yes, yeah, we have to do that. I think I'm not sure whether we have enough time left because I have another meeting at 9. In a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. No problem. I'm just giving my thoughts. Check how.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's very good.
Yeah. Okay.
So this could be an admission controller, for example, right?
Right.
I have the feeling that these two should be mapped together, right?
Just a second, babe. So the admission control, what you were mentioning, approval with optional policy. So it would listen on certain resource, right?
So here's my
Just like
thinking, Subhash. So here's what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, right? So basically, let's say, see, the question is, do you do this first? Or we can even split the admission controller. We could also split this in two, right? So you could basically say, look at how the API server works today in Kubernetes, right? So you get a requirement, so you get a new you get a new KRM resource, and it has a rule, right? And if you say, do not get something from this policy, it will reject, right? So it basically, it doesn't even come to this state. So you could even split. So what one of the things that we could do, we could build a separate admission controller, right?
Okay.
that is having a bunch of rules, but I have the feeling that this admission controller should be based on roles, right? So it should be based on the owners of that resource, they will act, right?
Okay. And which are the resource admission control listen on?
Any resource in this case, right? So anything. So here is high level thought. Yeah. So wait. Okay, let me put this maybe aside because otherwise I'm going to scream. I put it here, a controller, separate, or not. So here is my high level thought, Sebastian, which led to this conversation is that, okay, I have this feeling that the resources or the requirements that you get here, the ownership depends on the organization, right?
Right.
So in other words, a namespace could be owned by infra, right? Or,
Okay.
and RBAC rules could be owned by the security team, and then of course VLANs or OS would be owned by infra. Let's take that, right?
Okay.
So I'm of the opinion that the rules that are relevant for that environment should be owned somehow by certain people, right? So that means that various owners of rules should express their, let's say, rules, and they should then merge somehow as a rule engine that executes upon them, or do you separate it per owner or something like that? So that's where my thought was coming from.
I got it. Yeah. I think. Yeah.
It's maybe something to think about.
Yes.
What do we do there, right?
Yeah.
So let's maybe take the actions. Let's maybe write down what we should brainstorm upon or think about in between, right?
Yeah.
So one is is the ownership, right?
Right.
Slash resource mapping, right? Then the admission controller is it owner based? Sorry. Based or generic, right? What else? Yeah. How we split is, let's call it controller for now, right? Which controller do we need, right?
Right.
And so this is the dependency controller, the validation controller or something. We could call it validation, right?
Right.
I don't want to even make a statement other, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make
Right.
it. So this is not a decision. So it's just to brainstorm is how do we split this type of job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Few steps towards the solution.
Yeah. And then here it's also separated admission controller, right? Or not, right? That seems to be a bit it, right?
And, would you like to add like some example to understand the flow?
Examples with flows, yeah. Good point, yeah. That's it for now, right?
Yeah. Right. Okay.
I will call this not architecture, but I would call this brainstorm, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I will share this and then we will plan. Sorry, brainstorm. I will plan. Yeah.
Wim, are you planning to deliver it in R2 this implementation, or only it will be limited to designing?
I have the feeling that given the time, right, it's impossible to implement this in R2, right? But we should, I have the feeling that we should probably, my goal is to at least have a kind of a design ready, right? Or an architecture that we agree upon with the community.
Okay.
And once we have that, then we can potentially, that's why it's important to do the split, for example, of controllers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to probably brainstorm a little bit on the framework, but I'm expecting implementation to be. I don't see us doing this for R2, to be honest, but
Okay.
maybe we can do some experimentations or something. I'm experimenting myself a little bit. You saw with trying to. Yeah, but it's not. This is not really an implementation. This is mainly to to reason with myself. That's why I did it.
Yeah.
But I'm not focused on implementation as such at the moment. Just really to get this framework in place with the goal to have a view on which building blocks we need, and then at some point, hopefully in R3 we can then implement or something like that. That's basically how I'm thinking about it.
Yep. Actually, I was looking for the contribution, so yeah, I'm also willing to contribute here. So I was looking for the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, man.
All right, cool. Yeah, we are out of time, I think. Yeah. Thanks for the discussion. It's better to do one-on-one. It's you get more done. But okay, we'll continue. Yeah. So next week is the. Will you be there in the summit? By the way.
No, Wim. This time I'm not traveling. I'll be available remotely.
Okay. Okay, it would be, otherwise we could discuss face to face. So next week, probably I'm going to not schedule a meeting, but the week after I will schedule another meeting to follow up. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day.